Every single, and it's a great meeting.
Well,
To get
I was
involved in.
exercising 6 times a week, but I just had surgery 3 weeks ago, so I had to go.
Uh, Great. I forgot everything I was gonna say now. Now I realized this morning that Tanner's never seen me before about 12:30. And that's about when my brain turns on. It's very intentional when we pick our meetings. He's my sponsor. And yeah, so I'm a little, still turning on a little bit, but it is better than uh what it used to be. It used to be at least happy hour before my brain turned on. That was my one prepared joke and it didn't get a laugh. So now I gotta wing it. So I met Tanner the day after I got out of rehab. And it happened to be his birthday. And I heard him share in the zoo group 8 o'clock meeting. And there's something about Tanner when he speaks. Um, you listen. I don't know. There's a conviction and it's just so much intentionality in the way that he shares his story. And that was one of the reasons why I was instantly drawn to him and wanted to ask him to be my sponsor. The other reason was somebody else shared who had hung out with him for his birthday, and they were like, "Yeah, it's been 52 long years for you, Tanner. Like, congrats." And so immediately, like, you look at Tanner. I'm like, I want what you have. 52 years old and you look like that. That was a joke that I didn't pick up on immediately. I still want what he has. Yeah, it's crazy. I'm actually 1 day older than Tanner. I got out of rehab on my birthday. His birthday was the next day. That's when I met him. Felt very synchronous. I have a little woo woo in me. So when something like that happens, I'm just like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. So I asked him, he's like, let's get some coffee. Let's talk about it. And yeah, instantly someone that I felt so comfortable and just able to be authentic around. He brings that out in people. I think anyone who's met Tanner, at least in sobriety, would would agree that it's just a welcoming, safe space as soon as you're around him. And this isn't my first go at sobriety. I started this journey in October, and I had a really hard time wrapping my head around any of the organization, any of the steps of this program, especially step 3. That was incredibly hard for me, um, as I think it is for a lot of people, especially if you don't grow up with religion or any kind of spirituality. But working with Tanner, I mean, I'm on step 9 now. I was able to get through the real hard ones, and well, I mean, this one's hard too, obviously. Uh, yeah, having someone who works a program that is just pretty damn meticulous, really. It's been a great example for me, and it's been incredibly helpful in my journey. And yeah, Tanner's got a really insane story, like so many of us, like really down in deep in the trenches. And I mean, I certainly relate to that. And yeah, I think just like the fact that we're both here and sober today, man, is, some would call it a miracle, but I think it's really a product of a lot of fucking perseverance and hard work. And it shows just like we're people that are supposed to be here and share our stories. And yeah, I'm really glad we're here and alive. And I'm really excited that I get to introduce you and hear more of your story. I think that's all I got.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Tanner, and I'm an alcoholic. Um, My sobriety date is January 28th, 2021. Kind of middle of tail end of the COVID shutdown, I decided to sober up, which I feel has been pretty popular time for everybody to sober up, which is wonderful. You know, the fourth step was probably the most beneficial step for me through the entire program. And it's because I lived my life completely in fear. Everything that I did up until I joined the program was out of fear. And even a little bit in the program was completely out of fear. So kind of in order to paint that whole picture, I'm going to run you through what made me afraid. I grew up the middle child. In a divorced family. I had a mother who loved rules and loved structure and loved to travel and loved to do all kinds of things. And I had a father who was a prominent cocaine dealer in Aspen, Colorado. And so I had one house where there was rules and structure and responsibility, and I had another house that I spent half my time at where I could get away with murder. I could do whatever I want. I mean, I was playing Grand Theft Auto at like 7 years old, and you know, um, I was I was able to do probably far more than I should have been able to do at his house. Still, I went to a kindergarten through eighth grade school that offered an amazing education. I did well. I had good grades. I was a chubby kid. I was fat all the way up until I was 29. When I joined this program, I was 100 pounds heavier than I am today. Uh, Penniless, jobless, hopeless, all kinds of stuff. But I had this fear of not being liked, this fear of being alone, this fear of being different from other people from day one. And I struggled with that for far, far too long. Um, when I was 12, I wanted to kind of get in with my brother's friends and have more of a friend group. So I started smoking pot just so that I could be around some other people. Um, and, I kept looking at my father week in, week out, because that's where I got away with smoking pot, was at his house. And my dad was, drunk every night, watching sports every night. He's still doing that today. And I told myself that I never wanted to be like my father. I just never wanted to be that person. Um, and I I think I did a pretty good job of turning things around kind of towards the end. I When I got to high school, I did well. I had, straight A's, honor roll student, smoking pot every day. Um, and I it took me until my sophomore year of high school before I actually ever picked up a drink. Um, I drank I drank 2 shots of vodka, 2 shots of tequila, and 2 shots of rum out of my dad's collection. Kind of evened it out so that he wouldn't notice any of it was missing. Um, and I had a lot of fun that night by myself, just spinning in my head, and woke up the next day with a horrible headache. And I went to gym class first thing in the morning, and I had the star volleyball player spike a volleyball off my face, and that pain echoed for like hours. So I didn't really like see the appeal right off the bat. I moved schools my sophomore year, and I went to Glenwood Springs High School in Colorado, and when I moved schools, I mean, I came from such a small kindergarten through eighth grade school to public school to another public school that I had no friends at that point, just absolutely nobody, no community, nothing. So I kind of got my in with the rest of the crowd by smoking and selling pot. I got away with it because I had straight A's and nobody ever looked at me, and I had a medical card at 17 years old. But the friends I had weren't really friends. I didn't have that community. So junior year, I kind of started drinking a little bit more to kind of surround myself and kind of get rid of that fear of being alone, that fear of not being liked. And then alcohol made me communicate so well. It made me social. It made me the life of the party, and I absolutely adored that. Most of junior year, I was the designated bake driver, so I really wouldn't drink too heavily. But at the end of the year, I started drinking pretty heavily and just kind of leaned away from pot and leaned very, very heavily into alcohol. It became like my life, my social circle, my everything. Senior year got a little bit worse. And it's senior year at the end, we had a prom party with 4 schools, and I got an MIP, which is the only time I've ever been in trouble with the law. I still don't have a speeding ticket to this day. Just a warning from a week ago. Um, but I did well. They gave out 81 MIPs that night and 20 some odd distributing to minors. So court was all of my friends, which was kind of fun. But I didn't learn a great lesson. Um, I wasn't scared. I thought the party could just keep rolling. Um, then I graduated high school. My first year of college, I went to a small mountain school, and I drank mainly just because I was alone. All the friends that I had decided to go to bigger schools, bigger cities. Um, and so I just kind of worked a roofing job. I went to class and I drank. And then got sick of being alone, and I took a trip down to Denver, visited some friends that lived in what I call the party mecca. And I decided I had to be down there. So the campus I went to had 3 schools on the campus, but no official school housing. We had a skyscraper in the middle of downtown Denver, and floors 17 to 30 were college dorms. No RAs, security guard, no structure, just party mayhem. There's drinking and parties on every floor every night, and if you ran out of booze, you didn't have to drive across campus. It was go to the elevator, hit the button, and go down a floor. And so my grades slowly started to plummet as drinking kind of became the focal point of my experience there. I was a DJ in college, so I drank a lot for free. I would fall asleep or pass out drunk and just rip my headphones out of my turntables, which was not an awesome look at the time, but I certainly thought I was having the best experience of life. I thought I was the shit. I thought I was awesome. I had solved my problem of not being liked, my fear. I had solved my fear of being alone. I had built uh, a character that people liked to be around, and it was not healthy. But also in that first year down in Denver, I developed this fear of financial insecurity. The building I was living in was far too expensive for my budget. Couldn't afford school, couldn't afford anything. I started waiting tables, drank with my coworkers there. That wasn't enough money, so I had to find a better job. Started working at a amusement park photo company, and there I just started putting in too many hours. I wound up running the show. I was the general manager after a year, and I couldn't handle doing 60 to 80 hours a week of work and going to class. So I drank because I couldn't make it to the parties, and I drank by myself. And then I started drinking on the clock. And eventually I was asked to leave that job because I was either too drunk or too out of it to make the company work, and I couldn't make grades, and everything started falling apart a little bit. I moved over to working at a dispensary for 3 years, just making great decisions, just across the board. Put myself in that environment for a while, and I had a lot of fun, but the best thing about working at the dispensary was the liquor store 100 feet away. And, I could go over there and trick my coworkers into thinking I was buying sodas, but I was buying peppermint schnapps shooters and slamming them and walking back, with my hands over my head, breathing in and out, trying not to throw up because I just put so much alcohol into me so quickly. And, I struggled. I had a relationship end right there, and I didn't take it well. I drank harder and I drank harder and I drank harder just because I was alone and I didn't feel like people liked me anymore. And I felt like I was different. And I had this overwhelming fear of financial insecurity as well. Just I couldn't make ends meet, and so I drank because I couldn't. Um, at the end of working at that dispensary, I met another woman, and I was living with a roommate who had similar ideas about how much alcohol and pot we should smoke. Um, and I grew pretty sick of Denver, and I thought that it was time for some sort of change. So the woman that I was dating and myself, we decided to take a trip out to Oregon. Um, we fell in love with Oregon pretty quickly and decided kind of on a whim to move. I had a little bit of money from a workers' comp knee injury and took it to fund the trip and fund my alcohol problem along the way. And living in Oregon really alienated me from any sort of community. I had very little community in Denver, but what little community I had did not translate at all. I lost touch with everyone. Mhm. My family had always been kind of distant. We were never very connected people. So, mm, yeah, the community just, it wasn't there. It wasn't there at all. Family was anti-religious too. So the thought of having any kind of belief in anything or any kind of community through the church or whatnot was out the window as well. So in Oregon, I worked at a skateboard and snowboard company out there, and you were allowed to have a beer at your desk at 1 p.m. And I found that if you give an alcohol an inch, he takes 20 miles. So I had a bottle of vodka on my desk, just nicely camouflaged into a water bottle. And so I drank every day on the clock. And yeah, I started with an alcohol problem at a mile high in Denver. And when I got down to close to sea level, I could drink two, if not three times more before I was able to get drunk. So my chemical dependency in Oregon got so gnarly. I went from drinking a bottle and a fistful of shooters in Denver a night to drinking a half gallon a night to drinking a full gallon throughout the day of vodka. And if I didn't have alcohol in my system for more than a few hours, I started shaking. I uh, started sweating. I started having all of the withdrawal symptoms that everybody knows and hates. I moved. I moved out of Oregon, kind of a little bit on a quick motion. We spent about a month trying to quit drinking in Oregon, and I had a really hard time doing that. Mm. Started developing pain, which was pancreatitis at the time, and I knew from what the doctors had told me that I had to stop drinking, and I couldn't stop drinking in Oregon. I was riding what I call the bicycle of death, which is two cycles that kind of work together with each other. There's anxiety followed by depression, followed by anxiety, followed by depression. And it's, when I'm sobering up, I'm anxious. When I start drinking, I get depressed and I start planning how I'm going to quit. And then as I'm sobering up again, I am anxious and feeling this not even need to go get alcohol. It's just like I have to. I have to have it in my system. And so I'm riding these two cycles just into the grave. And it was time to sober up. So last second decision, we decided to throw everything in the car. Girl was going to go back to Denver, and I was going to get dropped off in Montana along the way. My mom had moved out here down to Garrison, and was running the horseback riding program at Rock Creek Cattle Company, and I was like, fine, I'll go hang out with my mom. Somewhere in Idaho, we stopped at the last liquor store for the time and grabbed one more bottle, and I got to Montana. And the next morning, my mom and I decided that we had to go to Helena to get supplies, kind of for me just showing up out of the blue. And 18 hours after my last drink at the time, I had a minute and a half long alcohol withdrawal seizure on public display in the middle of Helena's Walmart. And that was pretty earth shattering. I woke up to a paramedic above me and he asked me where I was. I told him Eugene, Oregon. He said, no, you're in Helena. Spent 5 days in St. Pete's in Helena. My mom wouldn't talk to me. I filled out Medicaid paperwork on my own, and when I got out of the hospital, I had a meeting with Boyd Andrews to get a referral to go to treatment. At the time, I'd love to say I tried my hardest to get into treatment, but I think I slacked off quite a bit. I called a few of them. They didn't have any beds open for Medicaid patients at the time. And I just kind of I was avoiding responsibility any way that I could. I had a lot of hospital bills already. I had, this fear of being alone, fear of being disliked, fear of being different from everybody else, and I didn't want to lean into that by going to a treatment center. I didn't want to deal with it. I just straight up did not want to deal with it. My mom and I weren't getting along, so I decided to do just another geographical and go back to Colorado to live with my father. Out there, I pursued outpatient treatment, which I didn't find very beneficial because I was in there on my own will and for alcohol, and everybody else I was in there with was court ordered for like meth. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm having a hard time relating with anybody here. Um, I, I lived with my dad, and that was one of the worst decisions I could make. There was always alcohol in the house. Um, and I continued to steal drinks from him. I kept going. 2019 is not my sobriety date, and damn do I wish it was. While living with my dad, he was broken on Social Security and retired, and so if he was out alcohol, I would wander the streets of Grand Junction looking for quarters or asking people for money so that I could grab a shooter or two and just keep the buzz rolling just a little bit. And I eventually went to my first AA meeting in Grand Junction. I couldn't get past the God thing, the higher power thing. I thought that I could fix this. I thought that I was solely able to do it on my own. Um, and That's when I met my buddy Wiley. My buddy Wiley is kind of my first informal sponsor. He's the one who showed me that I could have fun in AA. I could live a life worth meaning in AA. He took me to a young people's camp out. We had like 120 people from around Colorado show up. Had this amazing time with meetings in a hot spring and cliff jumping and just a super fun experience to be a part of. And I decided that like maybe I could make AA work for me if I could get past the God problem, but I didn't want to address it. So relapse after relapse after relapse kept occurring because I could not accept a power greater than myself. I had this fear of relying on something that was far greater than me. This fear that like I couldn't do it all on my own and that I needed help made me feel weak, made me feel different, made me feel all kinds of things. that I wasn't comfortable with. So after, about a month or two of living with my dad in Colorado and trying to do sobriety in Colorado, I decided to relocate back to Montana. Um, I had started dating a woman in Helena, and so I moved to Helena and went to the occasional meeting at the Alano Club. Couldn't take it seriously, couldn't relate. And when I say I didn't want to relate, is how that went. Um, and I drank again. I had a job at Target that I eventually got fired from for being drunk while stocking dog food. Um, Turns out they don't want you to use a pallet jack if you're hammered. Who would have thought? Um, and so, I struggled, struggled, and struggled. I went to the hospital again in Helena because I was afraid of having another withdrawal seizure. I spent about a year in Helena that time before I decided that, I got to do something different. Time to relocate again. Um, I had a family friend who had helped me get a car at the time, and I was putting in applications and resumes in Denver, and I had like half a job offer in Denver, found some roommates down there, and I said, screw it, I'm moving to Denver. Um, when I got to Denver, I got there right before the holidays, and right before the holidays, I had somebody hit my car, just got it in a parking lot of a grocery store, and somebody skimmed my debit card too and spent a whole bunch of money all over town. And I got drunk as I could. I got in my car and I rear-ended somebody in traffic and did more damage to my car. I have no idea how I don't have a DUI. I should have like over 700 DUIs because I drank and drove every day for multiple years. So I don't know, but um, I made it through that just hammered. I parked my car without a DUI and just proceeded to just continue to drink. And there was one day in early 2021 where I decided to just walk up and down a really busy street in Denver with a fistful of the 99 shooters. And I was just trying to figure out what car to jump in front of that would do it, which one would do the trick. And what kept me from doing it was stupid thoughts like I'm gonna ruin that person's day. They're at work, or oh, there's probably kids in that vehicle. I can't do that. Or and I got close a few times. I took a couple steps towards the street, and I was not in a good place. I made one phone call that day to my aunt, who was an ER nurse in New Jersey. And I think the reason I called her is because she was probably the furthest removed from anybody that like knew what was going on at the time. And she told me just go straight to the hospital. So I listened. I went to the hospital, afraid of having another seizure. And my dad showed up, came down there, and he asked me where I want to go. And I said, well, back to Montana. Uh, So I moved back in with my ex in Montana. Um, and I got to Helena on January 28th, and I hopped online and I did the fellowship meeting of AA from Helena through Zoom for the first time. They were still in the end of COVID shutdowns and stuff, so they were still on Zoom. But it was at that meeting I found my first home group. I found my first sponsor. Um, and I found that the topic that night was on higher powers, which is probably the topic that I needed to hear for that meeting. I like to say that in 2019, I admitted that I was powerless over alcohol when I had my seizure. But I didn't admit that my life had become unmanageable until 2021. I also kind of learned in that first meeting of the fellowship group that time has its place in change. You know, if I'm going to change my life, it's not going to happen overnight. I'm probably not going to be the one responsible for it, and it's going to take a lot of time. As I started working with my sponsor, John, I kind of, started talking to him about the idea of a higher power. Couldn't relate to anybody in the meetings yet. I wasn't ready and willing to do that. And it's because everybody else had a higher power and I didn't. So he had me start relating on the most basic levels. He said, if it's just the fact that you have the same color shoes as somebody else in the meeting, then relate on that. And so I started trying to do that, started trying to work program. I ran into a bit of a brick wall with the fact that I just couldn't grasp my head around a higher power. And I had this conversation with him where he's like, your higher power doesn't have to be a religious higher power, right? And that was an aha moment where I decided that, I could pick my own higher power, something that I could work with. Everybody was saying prayers to a Catholic or Christian God, and I couldn't get on board with that. I couldn't mean it. Couldn't feel the belief happening. But there's a guy in Helena who his higher power is a styrofoam cup of coffee, and he's got like 35 years of sobriety. He made that work for him. Something he could believe in, something that's always there for him. So I spent some time working on that. In Helena, I was doing DoorDash, which, man, say what you will about that program as far as work, but that was probably the best thing for me. I could stop work at a moment's notice and hop in a meeting. I could spend all day listening to Joe and Charlie tapes or listening to the Big Book on tape and just ponder and think a program all day long. Through that, I found a higher power, something science-based that I could work with. I really love physics, always have been an adrenaline junkie, and physics plays into a lot of those sports and a lot of the things I love to do. And I really love the law of inertia that, objects in motion tend to stay in motion and objects at rest tend to stay at rest. And if I work an AA program and I keep moving, my life keeps moving. But if I stop and drink, my life completely stops. Something I've revolved a lot of my program around, and it has worked wonders for me. Step 4 kind of came around after about 8 months of work in my program. I decided to leave the relationship I was in Helena, started living on my own. After about a year of sobriety, I decided to start my 4th step. I spent 6 months doing it. It was 37 pages long. I was thorough. And I realized that I was just afraid of just about everything you could be afraid of in life. I was angry at the world because things weren't going my way. I realized that I had lied to so many people, but the person I lied to the most was myself. And I wanted the world to be perfect. I really, really wanted the world to just be absolutely perfect the way that I had imagined it, the way it was supposed to go, according to Tanner. Step 5 was interesting for me. My first sponsor was getting ready to move to Idaho, so I had to find a new sponsor. And by an accident, I asked his sponsor to be my sponsor. So I had my grand sponsor. I think that's how that works. And so I shared it with both of them. before he moved to Idaho. And as I was kind of stepping into new sponsorship, I decided to share it with both of them. And it was really interesting to have two different people sit there and listen to it. I felt that it finally made me feel like I was free from everything that I was afraid of. I had written it down and shared it with two different people, and who knows, they could run off and tell 20 other people. And I guess that thought in my head wasn't scary. It kind of made me feel like it was out in the open. Like I didn't have to internalize it anymore. It wasn't just my problem anymore. Um, I was finally like honest uh, with more than just myself about being this scared liar. And holy shit, was that freeing. Excuse my French, but that was honestly one of the most freeing experiences I've ever had. I felt like people related to me about being afraid, which I didn't expect. I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel different. Um, I didn't feel insecure about all of those things anymore, which was, as I've said, incredibly freeing. Over the next couple days after I shared it, the stuff that had rented space in my brain for 27 years ish of life had kind of dissolved. There was this immense vacancy in my head, just and that vacancy kind of left me with the thought process that I needed to help me remove my defects of character coming up after this. Um, I also had a realization that the world would never be perfect, and that I'm an imperfect piece to an imperfect puzzle. So why does everything have to be so perfect for me? Uh, and it didn't. It didn't have to be at all. The world's going to do what it's going to do. I just have to control my actions and my behaviors, and I'll be all right. Um, so kind of rolling into step 6, I spent the um the next few months kind of really analyzing my defects of character and day-to-day life, and kind of long term too. I found that I was selfish in just about everywhere you can be selfish, whether it was traffic, relationships, money, just everywhere. I was selfish. I felt like I was the most important person in all of that. I interrupted people relentlessly in conversations because my word was more important than yours. I I focused on my own self-preservation over anybody else's, and I was completely trapped by that. Uh, it made me resentful. It made me angry. It made me afraid just every day. Step 7 kind of rolled around, and I found the St. Francis prayer from my sponsor. He gave me that, and I started using that every day to kind of help with that. For those of you who might not be familiar with the St. Francis prayer, it's Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. That where there is hatred, I may bring love. That where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. That where there is error, I may bring truth. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. That where there is despair, I may bring hope. That where there is shadows, I may bring light. That where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand rather than to be understood, to love rather than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens in the eternal life. And so I kind of found through there every kind of selfishness that I had been practicing my entire life, and immediately a way to deal with it. So I spent a lot of time looking at that prayer every morning and saying, all right, here's where I had been selfish yesterday. Let's turn that around and do something different in that situation. And just moving it day by day and just practicing that as much as I could. And I still practice it. It's something I kind of have to do every day. That kindergarten through eighth grade school that I went to had this big saying painted on the wall that said lifelong learning. And I like to elaborate on that by saying lifelong learning in the pursuit of progress, because that's what the seventh step is to me. It's learning how to live a better life and constantly trying to be a better person about it. So step 8 for me was pretty simple because I drank by myself. My community was non-existent. Very few people knew that I was ever drunk. It was a surprise to my mom when she found out that I had an alcohol problem. It's a surprise to my entire family. Um, and everybody was so distant as the norm in my family that it wasn't me secluding, it was me acting like everybody else. I didn't have very many people to make amends to, but the people that I did try to make an amends to said that the most important thing I could do to make that amends was just to live a life sober and practice a program and stay sober. So my ninth step is something that continues every single day because it is a living amends that I have to work with, and going to a program is what makes that work. Step 10 is also something that works every single day for me. It's something I practice. It's just keeping that step 4 from ever coming back and being a 37-page dissertation again. It's that constant inventory. And it helps me get through any kind of fear that I really deal with. You know, I lost a job this last holiday season, and I lost my mom within like 20 days. And if it wasn't for being able to work the 10th step, my community and the people around my program, there's no way I would have made it through that sober. But um, that experience this last holiday season did not terrorize my life. I kept moving, I kept working, my program got stronger. Everything was okay. It really was. I kind of understood through step 10 that, you know, radical acceptance leaves room for personal growth. And it's been important. Yeah, I used to keep a little 10th step card in my wallet, so when I got pissed off, angry, resentful, I could work through an inventory on it on paper, and now I can do it in my head, and I live a much freer life because of that. You know, step 11 is me just kind of constantly keeping that conversation with God open, constantly talking with them, and going about how powerless I was, how powerless I am, and asking really only for the will of my higher power and the power to keep that going. Show me what to do and give me the energy to do it. Um, you know, I started a new career path this summer, and it offers me a lot of opportunities to have a constant contact with my God. I deal with a lot of sketchy situations on an everyday basis, and you know, whether I'm climbing a 70-foot tree with a chainsaw or feeding stuff into a wood chipper that'll eat me whole, or you know, dealing with a bucket truck that'll kill me in a second. It's something that I have to be very mindful of. And I had no idea what I was doing when I got to this job, and I still don't. But a lot of the things that scare the shit out of me at work are things that I have a constant contact with my higher power about. And, you know, I had contact with him before this because this terrifies me. But, you know, here we are. And 12's been highlighted mostly by working with Wes. You know, I share in a lot of meetings and I work with my sponsee a lot, and that has only made my program just 1,000% better. So I can't thank you enough for coming around, because you make me work my program harder than it ever has been worked. And that's a blessing. Absolutely is. You know, I'll kind of end with saying that, you know, through these steps, I practice the serenity prayer every day, and without these steps, I wouldn't be able to practice it. I can't ask for the serenity to accept what I can't change. I can't ask for the courage to change the things I can, and I wouldn't know the wisdom to know the difference if it wasn't for working these steps. Um, like I said, when I got here, I was penniless, jobless, hopeless, basically homeless if it wasn't for an ex, and 100 pounds heavier. I, uh, I'm none of those things today, and I am far from any of those things. But if any one of those things was taken from my life today, it wouldn't be the end of the world like it used to be. I know exactly where to go. I know exactly what tools to use. And I know exactly how this program will continue to save my life. It's a completely wonderful thing. I know this program's one day at a time. Um, and at any point I could stop and drink, but I know that, you know, like the law of inertia says, if I keep coming to meetings, if I keep practicing this program, my life will keep moving. It's when I stop coming, it's when I stop practicing that I get in danger. And so that for that reason, you're going to see me. You're going to see me around 10, because I can't have that happen. Um, so I got to thank all of you guys for keeping me sober, because without other alcoholics, without these meetings, I would not be here today. I wouldn't live such a beautiful life filled with love and friends and community and adventure. I just I wouldn't have that. So thank all of you so much. And I do hope you all stay happy, safe, and sober until the end.